Hello, Pat. How are we doing on a quorum?
Hi, good morning. We need a couple more people to log on and then we'll be ready to go.
Okay, let me know.
Okay. Mr. Brady, I can take roll and we can begin if you'd like.
Yes, please. Pat will take roll.
Okay. City of Avondale, Charlene Pinella. City of Buckeye, Roger Klinginger.
Here.
City of Chandler, Ryan Peters.
Here.
City of El Mirage, Autumn Grooms. Town of Fountain Hills, Dave Trimble.
Here.
Town of Gilbert, Mary Goodman. City of Glendale, Kevin Link.
Here.
City of Goodyear, Julie Cairns.
Here.
Maricopa County, Jacqueline Edwards. City of Mesa, Chris Brady.
Here.
City of Peoria, Eric Strunk.
Here.
City of Phoenix, Mario Paniagua.
Here.
Town of Queen Creek, Bruce Gardner. City of Scottsdale, Mark Milanchenko. City of Surprise, Kristen Taylor.
Here.
City of Tempe, Stephen Methvin.
Here, Pat.
And Shatwan Reed from ADOT. Chair, we're ready to proceed.
Thank you very much, Pat. Welcome, everyone. We'll convene.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yes.
I apologize. I seem to always join right as Julie and Goodyear is saying she's here, which means that I've just missed Gilbert, but I'm here. I apologize for being tardy.
We're glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's convene the joint meeting of the Transit Management Committee and the Rail Management Committee for Wednesday, September 1st. Our first item is public comment. I understand, Pat, is this the item where we have an individual ready to speak on this item?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Blue Crowley is here today. He's coming to the podium.
All right, Mr. Crowley, please jump up, share your comments.
Blue Crowley, resident of Phoenix, and that took about 2 seconds. In the minutes, you're reviewing what were my written comments, and I only spoke in that for 3 minutes, and I find it's fascinating that the top paragraph was just who I am, and then the others were brief overviews. So when I see that you're going to be approving the minutes next, how many of you read what I had to say and know that how limited what it was that communicated? One of the things I had brought up was the Waymo contract and how when they had come and done the study session, they had to tell the board, we can't give you any information because we don't have any of it yet. So it progressed on, and then you guys say we're going to do active bidding out there to get what, who, and things that are done. One of the other things that I tried to bring up and say was that there were 335 individuals that were killed last year by the environment, heat exposure. And the heat stations, et cetera, have helped prevent that number from being even further. But when I see the rail saying, you can't just ride that and get out of the sun when we have all these overwhelming 110-degree days. And more important, you can't come over here and get a drink of water, because unless you're getting on our unit to do something and go somewhere, we don't want you there. And I think that that's abhorrent that this public entity doesn't have a little bit more compassion and do a reach out during the excessive heat and say, if you need some water, there's a fountain right there. And if you need to get out of the sun and stop overheating, you can get on this rail and ride and see all of the different art that we have at every single station, so that you can do something of culture and go on from there. I also had commented in my statements about how instead of decreasing service, we need to be increasing it. I was one of the ones that wrote for the Prop 400 stuff, and that was back in '89, and we said, hey, you need to use the whole grid and keep on expanding. What the service needs to be is 24 hours and 7 days a week. And oh yeah, and how many of your communities do you have inner bus systems? Phoenix, Mesa, Glendale, and then the rest of you, what is it? Why are you here if you're not going to participate to the maximums? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. We don't have anybody else, Pat? Was that it?
That's it, sir.
All right, thank you. Okay, that was public comment. Our next item is item number 2, Chief Executive Officer's report. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Thank you to the committees. Just an update, the Waymo, Valley Metro Waymo pilot program that we commenced a couple of years ago also had ASU as part of that, because this study was part of the US DOT Mobility on Demand Sandbox grant that we received from the DOT. And the intent of that study was and a pilot was to understand how autonomous vehicles can enhance customer experience, meet accessibility needs, and help to improve affordability and safety, especially for seniors and people with disabilities. As part of that, we utilized Waymo as, in many ways, part of our ride choice program in the Waymo service area. ASU studied the service, interviewed riders and studied, and they just and prepared a report on the pilot that was submitted to the Department of Transportation. They just released that report in the last week or so. Their survey results revealed primarily a very positive experience, revealed that riders were more engaged in activities outside the home. They were comfortable riding without operations specialists. They felt safe, and they said that in the future they would be interested in utilizing more autonomous vehicle transit services. Looking ahead, it looks like there is interest in further exploration to see how autonomous vehicles fit in the transit model, both on a first mile, last mile, but also on a service provision framework, which is why you saw just recently in the last meeting our desire and request to continue exploring autonomous vehicles and how they fit with transit. You can read the report. It's fairly long, but you could. We have provided a link at valleymetro.org, or if you have trouble doing that, please just call Pat, and she will be more than happy to provide you with a copy of that report. Second thing we're very, very pleased with is that on July 1, we introduced the Valley Metro app. This is part of our long-term goal to modernize and bring real-time mobile connection with our riders. Working with the city of Phoenix, we introduced this, and this is really the first stage of our long-term new ticketing and mobile access to our entire system, which you'll see rolled out over the next couple to 3 years as we revise and revamp and replace our current fare collection system. 14,000 downloads since July 1. The reason why we think that's so important is that when we first introduced this, our goal was 12,000 through December 31. So we've surpassed that in basically less than 2 months. So we're very happy with that. This download is more than twice what our previous or RideKick app had, and we are looking forward to move forward and ask you to watch as we in the city of Phoenix introduce more steps and stages as we move to modernize our fare collection system. A couple of the items I would like to go over with you before we get into the calendar. Would like to give you an update. A lot of people have asked about our front door boarding on our buses. We in the city of Phoenix are jointly installing physical barriers. I think we've talked to you about that before. You proved the expenditure on that from the Valley Metro side. There have been some delays due to parts and other things, as in most things during this pandemic. However, we are moving toward completion, both at the city of Phoenix and Valley Metro, hopefully sometime this month, with front door boarding being reinstituted in October. The exact date, the 11th, October 11th. You will see we are working on customer notification and on signs and other things. We want to give opportunity to ease into this. We are October 11th is the date that you will start seeing front door boarding, at which time we will have the capability of collecting fares again. The other thing I want to make you aware of, and I know some of you are probably having the same issues, we do have staffing issues like many people. It has started to impact our quality of service. Specifically on cleaning and other areas, on the light rail, cleaning of trains and platforms, and on the bus side, cleaning of buses. We are having difficulty in keeping those crews complete. We also, our service providers are finding it more difficult to fill operator positions and maintenance positions. So far, we've been able to maintain levels of service, but I just want to make you aware that we are right on the we're basically living on the edge. We have a lot of supervisors out there driving buses and taking care of trains, and our contractors, ACI and TransDev on Paratransit and First Transit, are doing whatever they can to entice operators. We have one of our providers who is actually providing large bonuses up to $2,500, signing bonuses to come on. And I just want to make you aware of that in case it does become a critical. It's not critical yet, but we are struggling to maintain those levels of staffing, which could affect service in a significant way. Right now, they are affecting it in a minor way. Simply, some runs don't get, very few runs may not get taken, but mainly in the preparation and other areas. So I just want to make you aware of that. We'll continue to update you and your staff as this goes along. Mr. Chair, that's my report. Oh, once again, you see the calendar and the schedule. One thing to let you know is that the Board of Directors meeting that was scheduled for September 16th has been moved to September 30th. Just to put that on your calendar. And Mr. Chair, that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Appreciate that. Any questions for Mr. Smith? All right, if not, we'll continue to the consent agenda. We've now currently moved the minutes to the consent agenda. So the consent agenda includes the minutes and the other items regarding network hardware maintenance agreements, Title VI program update, and federal government relations consulting services. That is the consent. Do you have any questions, concerns, or a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
This is Mario from Phoenix. Can we pull off item 3D, the Federal Government Relations Consulting Services item for
We'll pull that off for
additional discussions?
individual regular agenda. Fine.
Great, thank you.
Are there questions or comments from the group? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent item, which will include items 3A through 3C. Do I have a motion?
This is Mario. I'd move approval.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
Consent. And we have a second by Eric. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. For the consent items, let's go ahead now, take item 3D as a regular agenda item. Do we have any presentation, any background from staff they'd like to share before we open up for questions?
I can give a brief background of this. As you can see, we in January 2018, at the recommendation of the boards and city staff, we, Valley Metro, retained for the first time in a few years federal lobbyist. We did that because the interests of the region and our interactions with the federal government, especially the FTA, are unique and specific, both on a capital project on the rail side. We had several projects before the FTA, but also on overall on funding through 5307, service transportation and other things. The contract in January of 2018 was initially a total 5 years, a 2-year contract with 3 one-year issues, and it contemplated a normal environment with specifically anticipating service transportation renewal, which affects all of us, other funding issues related to bus and paratransit, and specifically capital programs at that time. South Central, Tempe Streetcar, and Northwest were the 3 projects that were on the table. As we can all imagine, in January of 2018, nobody anticipated what was going to happen just, I guess, a year or so later, a couple of years later with the pandemic, with the shutdown. No one also anticipated the significant political and other issues that would come with our capital project funding, the issues, the political issues with the 4 lanes, no trains, how those filtered back to Washington, the issues with the relief funding. And we found that the scope of what we were asking our federal lobbyists to accomplish expanded significantly. And not only did it expand significantly, they also stepped up and were instrumental in protecting our interests, but also in making things happen. I would say that many of the good things that happened, including the full funding grant agreement on both on Tempe and on especially on South Central, and what came to this region in a non-rail CIG through the relief funding and through as the service transportation has gone is directly related to efforts of our lobbyists. I can tell you that we meet with them once a week. They are in constant communication with our delegations, Washington offices, and with congressional staff, especially with their contacts on appropriations and finance in both the House and the Senate, and House Transportation and the Senate committees that deal with transit. They have gone far beyond what their original scope was. We changed that scope and increased their services a while ago, and what we found is that based on the initial authorization, which was based on a more limited scope, that we basically have run out of contract authority based on that limited scope. And what we're asking for now is to increase the amount of contract authority to take us through the end of this contract based on the revised scope that we have. Once again, I've worked in this area a long time, and I can tell you that we have been fortunate to have hired Cardinal Infrastructure. In my experience in Washington, doing a lot of work and lobbying back there, there's a lot of good lobbying firms. Many of you hire your own, and they're good. But as far as transportation and FTA, I've never seen anyone better than the one we are fortunate to have, which is Cardinal Infrastructure, which is why we are very happy to have them on board. They are essential to what we do as a region and what we can accomplish. And with what we have on the plate now in DC with the infrastructure bill still working its way through Congress, the reconciliation, which also has many things related to funding of transit in it, and with service transportation due to expire on September 30th, and the renewal of that, the services of our lobbyists are as necessary now and as broad as on the region as they ever have been. So that's the background. That's why you have the request in front of you. And I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions? Mario?
Mr. Chair, yes, this is Mario. Just a couple comments and questions. I just want to start by saying I agree with Mr. Smith in terms of the value of the federal consultant and the lobbying services that they provide. That's a very valuable service that's needed for Valley Metro, as well as some of the member cities. And I don't disagree that they've done a good job as well. Nor do I disagree that there's been some unanticipated circumstances. I think one of the challenges here is that Scott, you talked about changing the scope and increasing the scope of their work. I don't believe that the board was ever involved in that discussion over the last 3.5 years to be able to do that. And so the fact that all of the authority that was authorized in the contract has already been paid was a decision made by staff. I think there's an issue with that, and we're pretty uncomfortable with the way that's played out. And so I think Phoenix is going to have a really hard time. We're just not able to move this forward. I would suggest maybe pushing this out at least another month so that we can talk more about this, get some additional questions answered. But otherwise, I think Phoenix would have to be a no vote at this point.
Any other questions on this item? I'll just weigh in. I mean, I get it. I think you said all the right things, Mario, about why this is a good idea. I guess at some point we have to let Valley Metro be Valley Metro and make decisions. And I think we have to be really careful because I'm feeling it. We got to be careful not to micromanage. We kind of have to let them read the field and make decisions like this. I get it. It was a big decision, but my council, that would be very difficult, I think, for a council to do that to a city manager when you're in the middle of all these transitions and going. I think maybe the better opportunity would be to at least talk about this with us, but I don't see the reason why we need to micromanage those kind of decisions. I think we think it's a good idea. I think we think it's the right thing to do. I think that the argument is, well, we wish we would have known sooner. I guess I'm worried about what the message is, because if the issue is, yeah, we agree this needs to be done, yes, it's a reasonable amount of dollars, then is a discussion that we're just upset because we didn't know sooner. At some point, these are, we're all big boys, we're big organizations, and we have to pay managers to do the best. So Mesa supports this. I don't know how the rest of everybody feels. Mr. Smith, if it delays a month, it sounds like you still have enough money to keep paying the consultant at this current expanded level. Is that correct?
It is. It is, and I appreciate your comments. I also have to go back, and it seems to me like we're looking in the back. We all wish that things wouldn't have had to react the way we did, but when there's a fire that breaks out and there's a significant thing, our first impression is to take care of the fire and take care of the members and do what we need to make sure that happens. And I guess in retrospect, you can always look back and say, gee, we should have stopped, gone through a 3-month process and talked to the board about stuff, but we did what we needed to. And we had authority of the board to spend a certain amount of money, and we spent that. And when it came up, we came back. Didn't hear anyone, and I don't think we second guessed our willingness to adjust to the rapidly changing environment in Washington, D.C. And we addressed those issues as we had to, and it actually worked out very, very well for us, to the tune of literally hundreds of millions of dollars that came into our region. Much of that would not happen but for us being able to literally pivot on a dime and up our game in Washington, D.C. So I would just say that I appreciate your statement. You don't always get the chance to stop and contemplate and go back whether this is ask for forgiveness instead of permission. I think we did what we needed to, and I think the results are self-explanatory.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the group? What's the
Mr.
group,
Chair, this is Mario.
Yeah, go ahead, Mario.
So appreciate the opportunity to just respond one more time. I just wanted to clarify that I don't agree that this is micromanaging. I think that this is something that is the board's responsibility. This is not this level of a contract, and the authority would fall under the board. I think that, if we were talking about a few months or even later in the same year, where decisions were made about increasing the scope and responsibility and coming back and having that discussion, I think that would be a different kind of thing, much more acceptable than coming 3.5 years into the contract and saying, oh, suddenly we run out, and it's kind of a gun to the head situation, to where it's a decision now by the board that if we don't approve this item going forward, then you're faced with not having that federal representation and being able to play out the contract. So I don't necessarily agree. I haven't mentioned that, in my comments that were positive. I don't know if the funding is reasonable based on what is being presented here, which is why I think we need a little more time to dig into this, and I suggested that. But I just wanted to clarify that I don't agree that we're trying to micromanage. We're certainly not trying to do that. We're not trying to be an obstacle. It really truly is wanting to make sure that this is properly managed and done the right way in accordance with what the board's given the authority to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you, Mario. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I think we still need to continue to evaluate the reaction of the board, of our elected officials, and how much we're getting into the business of this agency. I think while it's always a prerogative of our electeds to do that, I think we have to be, as good administrators, also warn them when it becomes too much of a burden, and it doesn't allow an agency to move and pivot. I get it. Maybe there's other ways to communicate these things, but this seems like a very fundamental issue for a large agency like this. I will tell you, I think the number is more than reasonable. It's less than what we spend. And based on the background information, it looks very reasonable compared to other peer agencies. But if you want to make a motion to defer this for a month, I think that would be appropriate, Mario, if you want to do that.
Okay. Thank you,
And
Mr.
if I
Chair.
could, just before Mario does this, if I could, just one clarification. When I say change the scope, we did not look at the scope and change what we had entered into. The lobbyists were providing the same service. The scope changed simply because we were presented with additional challenges that we did not anticipate, significant. And basically, it's getting back to the fire thing. It's like if you have a major fires and all of a sudden your fire department comes and says, we had to pay overtime to fight these fires. We did the same thing. It's just that with both the challenges with South Central and the 4 lanes, no trains, and the political issue there, and then also the challenges with the pandemic, we were asking our lobbyists to do the same thing, but do it much more intensively, and spend much greater time in doing it because the needs presented themselves. So I just want to make sure that when we say change the scope, we didn't change what they did. The situation on the ground changed so rapidly and so significantly that we adjusted and reacted to that. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody.
All right, Mario, do you want to make that motion?
I would move that we push this out to next month's meeting so that we can get some more time to talk about this and get some questions answered.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Julian Goodyear.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to delay this item till next meeting in October. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I will be opposing that. Anybody else? Okay. So just one dissent. Okay, very good. Thank you. Now we're moving to item 4. Probably expenditures and solicitations. Any questions on item number 4? Okay, any future item requests or update on future current events? All right, our next meeting will be Wednesday, October 6th, 2021 at 11 a.m. Very good. All right, so that completes our joint meeting. Now we'll be moving to our Transit Management Committee meeting for September 1st, 2021. Pat, any items on public comment? Or anybody there? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Crowley is present. He'd like to provide public comment.
Okay, Mr. Crowley.
In the management transit committee meeting, it has to be an action. So when you took the public comment written and then said, well, we'll look at it in the minutes later, how are you really dealing with the public, and how is that applicable when you do it after the fact? I'll be covering agenda item 2B. I was a big proponent of the rural transportation and wondered when we're going to be getting one to Tonopah and to Queen Creek. But more than that, I notice in this that you can actually use our system to go all the way to Ajo and then use the PEMA system to get to Tucson. So why haven't we figured this out before as one of the ways of expanding and letting people know if you need to get from Phoenix to Tucson, you can do it through rural transportation. I look at with what La Paz has done, and that the route that goes along US 60 going through Wickenburg and Aguila and all the other northwest communities and Surprise, we have never worked with them. I tried to get this done and accomplished back in the 08 with Brian Youngworth when they were two different agencies, and he said, well, if La Paz wants, I'll help them get a bigger bus, because their excuse for not picking up people in Maricopa County and taking them to the Surprise ending of the bus route, their statement was our buses aren't big enough. I find it unfortunate that ADOT isn't here, because the reason we don't have a Wickenburg connector is that ADOT decided that the money that was used for that was not being as efficiently used as it could be for any of their other rural routes. So as you are doing planning in the future, it's not just this part that needs to get done and accomplished. It's the other parts of the system that still need to be done and addressed. As I said, where's the one to Queen Creek? Where's the one to Tonopah? You do now have something coming in from Union Hills, but Rio Verde has what? I'd also like to change one of the statements from before with Avondale, your circulator, and that you do try to get the parts done. And yes, Buckeye, two of the route, or part of the route, does go into your city, but Goodyear, with the size that you are now, why don't you have an intercity bus? Where in Buckeye is it in the future going to be actual? And when are you going to start doing things for the whole region and the rural part of it? We had in there, had a bus coming from Wickenburg that needs to be replaced.
Okay, thank you for your comments. No other public comments, I'm assuming, Pat?
No, that was it.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from August 7th, 2021. Item 2B, authorization to issue a competitive solicitation for contracted transportation services to operate the rural connector service. Those are the items on consent. Do I have a motion for approval?
Mr. Chairman, this is Roger. Can I request a clarification on item 2B?
Sure.
Okay, and I don't know if this is Mr. Abraham or what. In the background discussion, it indicates that the route now is from, well, includes Ajo, Gila Bend, Buckeye, Goodyear, Avondale, Towson, and Phoenix. And then the solicitation says it's for service from, let me just get this right here, Ajo, Gila Bend, Phoenix, and Tucson. And I'm just wondering if that includes Buckeye, Avondale, Goodyear, and Tolleson, or it was just omitted, or is that a change?
Mr. Chair, members of TMC, RMC, this is Ray Abraham. It'll stay the same as it is today, sir. We're not making any changes. It will include the trips to Buckeye.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. With that, Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions, I'd move approval of the consent agenda.
All right, we have a motion for approval for the consent. Do we have a second?
I'll second. That's fine.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, the consent agenda is approved. The next item is item 3 for future agenda item requests and report on current events. Any comments? A future request for future agenda items from the group? Okay, if not, item 4, the next TMC meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, October 6th, 2021. Right now, thank you for all of you for joining for that. Our last one section today is the Rail Management Committee meeting for September 1st, 2021. So we'll have all the Rail Management Committee members. Pat, do we have any public comment on this for this agenda?
Yes, Mr. Blue Crowley.
Mr. Crowley, please.
I did put in comments, but they're not shown in the minutes. It may have been because of a technical error, because I called after I had put the other ones in, but it's of no matter. It's the same thing that I'm going to be saying now that I've been saying before, that in your future planning, when are you going to be looking at the heavy rail? I did go back in the early 2000s to a meeting out in Chandler and Gilbert where they were saying, hey, you're going to be running the train from Tucson. Here's where we need to be getting it done in that. And I keep on looking at every one of the 28 communities within MAG have a railroad spur in them. Why isn't it a part of our our rail transportation? Also, with my statements at the first meeting of the joint meeting, like I said, 56 people died. How many of them would have lived if they could have just gotten into one of your cars, cooled down enough that they weren't compromised, or maybe gotten a drink of water? I look at your code of conduct and things such as no radios. When I'm listening to a radio in that car, if it's not bothering anybody else, why should it bother you? When I see the numbers that you're using for your complaints, I go, well, they got this 350 number there in the quarterly report. And I'm wondering how the report went in from my friend who happens to be an SMI, seriously mentally ill, had his disabled card with him and got confronted on the platform that they needed to show him. He needed to show his documentation. He had it in his hand, was handing it to the neo-Nazi that was accosting him, the short neo-Nazi that was accosting him. And the document fell to the ground, whereupon both individuals went to put their foot on it. My friend was charged with assaulting an officer. He was taken in, spent 8 days in there, not on his meds, and the results were more negative than they should have been. When he did go to court, they said that this was just a joke, and goodbye, you're dismissed. But the damage had already been done. The Allied Burton employees have the attitude that that's their country and their world, and they don't understand that they're working for you and you work for us. And with their attitudes and behaviors to some of the customers, I find it fascinating that in your report, that would have been listed as an incident. And whose fault? Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. We're ready to move to the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from August 4th, 2021. And item 2B, the Ethernet switches to support new fare collection system contract award. Do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, this is Mario. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mario. Mario's made a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, Stephen Methvin from Tempe. I offer a second.
Thank you, Steve. You've been so quiet today. I wasn't sure what was going on. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great. Let's go. The next one is item 3, future agenda items, request and report on current events. Any comments on that? Right. The next item is item number 4. Our next meeting will be October 6, 2021 at 11 a.m. Pat, are we done?
Yes, sir, in record time, I must add.
Oh, despite Mr. Smith pontificating. That's awesome. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good week.